People are seeking peace today, and often that's the wrong thing to pursue. Peace is a result. It's a result of living a life that's pleasing unto God. There are certain qualities that we must exhibit if we're going to have peace. First of all, we need to become more sympathetic. We also need to become more compassionate, more loving. We also need to treat others like we want to be treated, kind of a basic human quality. Additionally, let's just do good. Thank you for tuning in today. I hope this message will be helpful. Our text today is found in 1 Peter 3, beginning with verse 8. Finally, all of you live in harmony with one another. Be sympathetic, love as brothers, be compassionate and humble. Do not repay evil with evil or insult with insult, but with blessing, because to this you were called, so that you may inherit a blessing. Whoever would love his life and see good days must keep his tongue from evil and his lips from deceitful speech. He must turn from evil and do good. He must seek peace and pursue it. For the eyes of the Lord are on the righteous, and his ears are attentive to their prayer. But the face of the Lord is against those who do evil. This is the word of God for us, the people of God.
Thanks be to God.
How to live in peace. First of all, we must begin by realizing this is for all of us. And when I say that, I don't know if you've heard the story. I told the story once before about this guy who every single Sunday would greet the preacher at the door and say, "You sure told him today, didn't you, preacher?" Every Sunday. So one particular Sunday, there was a blizzard that came and hit his town. And he's sitting in the parsonage across the street from the church. And he said, "Honey, should we have church today?" And she said, "Well, yeah, there might be somebody show up." So he got out a shovel and shoveled his way to the church, and there was the light already on. And there sat that guy who always said, "Preacher, you should have told him today." And the preacher said, "I finally have my shot at him. I've been praying for this day for the last 10 years. So he got up and did the sermon. He did music, did all the liturgies, did a sermon, gave him an invitation, and the guy stood there very stoic. And at the door he said, "Preacher, if they'd have been here today, you sure would have told them." This is truly for all of us. Blessed are the peacemakers, right? We need to understand that living in peace is God's call for all of us. And it obviously begins by making peace with God and having that peace in our hearts, to the extent that we are no longer fretting about things that don't matter. And I've said many times that the head of the chaplains department at Nash Hospital taught me a great lesson. And his true words have never been spoken. Truer words have never been spoken. He said, "You're not free to live until you faced your own mortality." First time I faced my own mortality was when I was 6 years old at Atlantic Beach. I was tumbling in riptide, going out head over heels. I saw the white light, and I bumped into a guy who was probably my size, and he picked me up by the seat of my pants and hauled me to the shore. Had he not been standing right there, I'd have been dead. No doubt in my mind. I've also had a number of instances where I had that brush, if you will. I had a 64.5 candy apple red Mustang. My dad said it was too much money until he drove it, and he bought it on the spot. Going from Tarboro to Rocky Mount, and a man pulled out in front of me. And rather than hitting him broadside, I snatched the car off the road, hit a driveway, right at the base of the driveway, in a ditch, nose down, did a 360 in the air, rolled the car 3 times. When I got out of the car, the windshield was under the back tires, and it was the day after I had installed a seatbelt and was wearing it. Wow. Realizing that this is for all of us, he says, finally. Beginning a section with finally sounds like a preacher, doesn't it? My last point. Somebody asked the preacher, said, when you say this is my last point, what do you mean? And the little child spoke up, nothing. Finally, all of you live in harmony with one another. Wow. Next point is, how do we do that? We live in peace by becoming more sympathetic and less judgmental. You know the old statement, walk a mile in somebody else's shoes? Being sympathetic, understanding, and I believe this to be true, understanding that most people are doing the very best they know how with what they've got, the cards that have been dealt them. I believe that. That doesn't always mean they're doing the right thing. But the intentions behind that are pretty pretty decent. Of course, there are people out there that it seem to apply to, right? More sympathetic. How does a person develop sympathy? They develop sympathy by realizing that the person that they're dealing with is as fragile as anybody else. Stopping and thinking before we speak. Now let me say, my first stroke was a gift from God. A total gift from God. I wish it had happened when I was 20 years old. Wow. Because I had a slight delay and it caused me to think before I speak. That would have been really helpful when I was here the first time. Important fact is that most people, sometimes what we think comes out too quickly. And sometimes we don't understand how wounding that can be. Now, I'm not perfect in that area at all. I still slip and just say the wrong thing. But the goal is not to do that. Being more sympathetic. And it's interesting here that in 1 Peter 3:8b, be sympathetic is written as an imperative. It's not a suggestion. It's written as, you must do this. Wow. So how do we process what I'm saying today? How many of us find ourselves going off on the least things that are important? They're just not important. And we find ourselves being upset and angry, often in misguided ways. I find myself when I go off on something realizing that what I'm mad about isn't even what's going on. I've let my anger cup get too full. And it doesn't take much to overflow it. Becoming more sympathetic. Live in peace by becoming more loving and compassionate. He says, love his brothers. Now, in our household, there are 4 boys in our household. I have 2 older sisters. One of my younger brothers passed away, as you remember. We ruled our neighborhood, pretty much. At least we like to think we did. But the point being was, we would fight like cats and dogs at home. One particular snow day, my younger brother and my older brother got into a fight of sorts on the sofa. My older brother threw my younger brother through the plate glass window in the snow. And then all of a sudden they're working on each other. How can we get away? How can we fix this? The old story was, we'll fight among ourselves, but don't pick on us. We'll come get you. Anybody else have a family like that? Sure you did. If you have brothers and sisters, that's the way it was. Because we want to protect ourselves. Now, he says, now think about this, what I just said. He said, love his brothers. What does that mean? It means we come to each other's help and rescue in time of a problem. And we do that fairly well at our church here. I'm thankful for that. It's important to realize that's part of our identity as believers, and it's part of our witness to the world, how we love as brothers. Jesus said, by this you will know that you are my what? Disciples, that you have love one for another. Now, it doesn't mean you always like each other. Nowhere in the Bible does it say you got to like each other. It doesn't. That's not in there anywhere. But you love each other. And the point is, we need to learn to make a difference in how we let that model show. For instance, loving each other as brothers means that we have each other's back all the time. That's important. And it says, be compassionate and humble. Loving brothers and being compassionate and humble. Humility is another mark of how we ought to live our lives. And it begins with Paul saying it this way: humble yourselves before the Almighty. Humility begins with how we perceive ourselves before God. And let me say this, how I see myself before God, at least today. I am a broken vessel. And God is in the work of putting the pieces back together, one piece at a time. On the way in this morning, I stopped someone and said, I've had the best week this past week that I've had since December. Holy cow. There is hope. And I went from, let me tell you what I did. I went from, God, if this is all I've got, please take me home now, to transition to, God, if this is all I've got, I'm going to still serve you faithfully. And that was a huge transition for me to make. It doesn't sound like much, does it? But it's a big deal. Being more loving and compassionate. And I got to say, I have seen more compassion toward me in the last 6 months than I've ever deserved from you guys. Thank you. We understand the fragile nature of people. And guess what? We're all broken. And God is putting us all back together. No one in here doesn't have problems. No one here today doesn't have challenges. We all have those challenges, right? Think of, RL. He's now in Myrtle Beach with Brian and Brian's wife. What challenges does RL have? He can barely see. His memory is sketchy at best. He can barely walk and get around. How can anybody not have compassion on someone like that? And humility. The second step of humility is putting other people first. Putting other people first. Putting their needs ahead of our own. I'm not talking about doormat theology here at all. But one of the things we gain in terms of self-esteem is when we have enough internal power to value other people more than we value ourselves. And I think it takes strength to do that, not weakness. Next thing in living in peace, we live in peace by treating others like you want to be treated. Wow. I was thinking today about Mother's Day, obviously. And it's interesting to me. The Bible says, honor your father and mother. True? That doesn't stop when they die. We're never released from that command. Honor your mama and your daddy. Always. I remember that day that I had to goodbye with my mom. I said, Mom, one of the things I wanted to tell her, I will always honor your memory. Wow. a basic human need is to treat other people like we want to be treated. And he really, in this passage, defines what that looks like. Don't repay evil with evil. That's how we treat other people like we want to be treated. You don't treat other people with evil with evil. You don't go back on people when you feel like slamming them or saying something harsh about them. You don't do evil for evil. No benefit whatsoever for that. In fact, Proverbs says, a soft answer turns away wrath, but grievous words stir up anger. He goes on and says, or insult with insult. Now, let me say this about insults. And I'm not trying to say anything harsh about us Southerners. But in a Southern man way, if you're not insulting somebody, you don't like them. Playfully. Is that true? I think it's true. You go around the barbecue cookers, if they're not trading jabs, they're mad at something. And it's all fair and fun. But so often it's not fair and fun. He says, but instead of insult with insult, blessing. Because to this you are called so that you may inherit a blessing. When we bless others, God blesses us. And he continues to define what it means to treat other people like we want to be treated. For whoever would love life and see good days must keep his tongue from evil and his lips from deceitful speech. That's how we treat other people like we want to be treated. We don't retaliate. We turn the other cheek. I love this one. Living in peace by just doing good. He said, turn from evil and do good. Seek peace and pursue it. That's redundancy. Seek peace and pursue it. Nicole told me one time I should be in charge of the redundancy department of redundancy. You get that when you get home. Doing good. Just doing good. And it's interesting here that he doesn't define what good is. Why is that? I think deep down in our hearts we know what good is. It's harder to define, but doing good. A number of years ago, I was pastoring a little church before I moved here. And the husband and wife, husband was a veterinarian, his wife was a nurse, and they both had the flu and were very, very sick. And additionally to having the flu, they had a lawnmower that was busted. I had a new lawnmower. So I was out one Sunday morning or Sunday afternoon, short pants on, flip-flops on, t-shirt on, cutting his grass. And the church members found out about it, and I got beat to a pulp over that. I was just doing good. Had no idea it was a problem. I'll not tell you who I said this to. Some of you will figure it out. You know, the ox can be in the ditch, right? Is that true? What does he mean that? Well, if your ox is in the ditch, you get him out of the ditch, even if it's on the Sabbath. We had a community person one time that every time I'd see him over at Jack's store, he'd say, I'd have been in church on Sunday, but the ox was in the ditch. I bet he said it 40 or 50 times before I nailed him. I showed up at his place on Monday morning with a hammer and a bunch of nails. Really. He said, what are you doing? I'm going to fix that fence of yours. You're killing your ox. I really did that. The point is, do good. Just do good. For the eyes of the Lord are what? on the righteous. Now, the psalm, he's quoting a psalm here. And sometimes folks take this as being intimidating. But the eyes of the Lord on us is meant to be comforting. I remember, tells you how old I am. I remember a song that came out way, way long ago that said, God is going to get you for that. Anybody remember that song? It was playing in the background on American Graffiti when they were at the drive-in theater. I think it's important not to have that perspective. See, we're told to fear God, right? Fear God. But it doesn't mean be afraid of Him. It means reverence Him. Do respect Him. The eyes of the Lord are on the righteous, and what? And His ears are attentive to their prayer. But the face of the Lord is against those who do evil. Do good. Live in peace by realizing this is for all of us. I know somebody's going to greet me at the door today saying, boy, you told him today, preacher. I might be disappointed if Freddie doesn't do that. Live in peace by becoming more sympathetic. By putting our feet in their shoes, so to speak. Live in peace by being more loving and compassionate. By treating others like we want to be treated, by doing good. Let's pray together. Father, with your help, thank you for tuning into Horns Church today. I hope this message has been helpful. We all need peace. If this message has been helpful and you'd like to talk about it, give me a call at 252-237-4616. I'll be glad to talk with you about this or anything else related to your spiritual journey. God bless you, and may your week be filled with peace.